My name is Gabriela Villegas Boyland, and I am your instructor for this Physical Geology, Geology 101 class that you have. The first topic that we're going to cover for the class will be Introduction to Geology. So within this lecture, we will go through the following topics. Again, we'll only cover them in the surface, not in depth, but we will cover the science of geology, why we should study geology, the development of geology as a science, geologic time, nature of scientific inquiry, the Earth spheres, the formation of the Earth and its early history, the Earth layers, and we'll make great emphasis on this last two. And we'll also shortly go through the major features that make up the face of the Earth. So looking at oceans and looking at continents and the features within those two. So just as a first glance, we see in this picture, which I think is beautiful, a mountain range, and here this is the Kananaskis range in Alberta. This was up in a hike that we did with my husband during our honeymoon. It's called Buller Pass, and it was early June in case you are wondering and want to go to it because it's absolutely gorgeous. But what you're seeing here in this picture is a bunch of rocks, for the most part limestones, that have been deformed, but they were formed many million years ago, and by time they've been deformed to what we see them today. So you see that most of them are tilted, and you see that most of them have also been greatly eroded by probably glaciation from the last glacial maximum. So with that, it's just an eye-opener into what geology has to offer. Also, and I forgot to mention, I'm from Colombia, and so you will notice that I have an accent, and I will continue to have one, unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess, for some of you, throughout the rest of the lecture series. So I hope it's not too much of trouble, but if it is and you can't understand, please let me know, and I'll be as clear as possible in the future. Thank you. So the science of geology. So geology comes from the Greek geo, which means earth, and logos, which means discourse. So geology overall is going to be the science that pursues an understanding of planet Earth. So this can be very challenging because our planet is a very dynamic one, with many interacting parts that change often. So sometimes those parts and changes being fast, as in volcanic eruptions or landslides, for example, but sometimes these changes can take millions of years or even billions of years to occur, such as sedimentation rates, for example, and we'll look into this as we go along in the class. So we need scales both of size and of space that will be different throughout the study of Earth's processes. So they're going to vary both in time and in space. So studying things in a microscale and macro scale, and also studying them and their change and interaction in microseconds to millions of years is going to help us narrow down what the different processes of the Earth that are taking place on Earth are. And within this major field of geology, there are three sort of subclassifications that we're making to understand the study of the Earth. And those three main subclassifications are going to be physical geology, historical geology, and environmental geology. So physical geology is the course you're going to be taking now. Historical geology is a course that's offered at our school as well. I recommend it highly, but it goes a little bit more into the timing of things and why they occurred then, and how we may not predict but forecast rather how some of those things may occur again or may occur at a different rate perhaps. And then environmental geology is kind of split into two different classes here at the College of Western Idaho. One of them being, I think is just called environmental geology and natural resources. And then the second one being natural disasters or natural hazards. So I teach the natural hazards class online if you're interested. And then the environmental geology course is taught both in person and online by my colleague Anders. So if you're interested in those, they're available to you. In these slides, I'm going to go over the three main subclassifications of geology that I just told you about. So the first one being physical geology. Again, that's the course that we're going to be taking from now on. But basically, physical geology is going to be the main focus of the class and of the book. It examines the materials that compose the Earth, and it seeks to understand the many processes that operate beneath and also upon its surface. So here we're seeing three different pictures. One of them shows some of the various minerals that form at depth and how they get deformed by surface weathering agents, for example, and by burial, which brings them to high temperatures and high pressure. So you're seeing the left side picture with some of the plagioclase and orthoclase minerals that we have. They're being compressed and they're being squished, and that's why you're seeing them kind of like sort of like blobs that have been just stretched out towards the sides. And then but a bunch of other minerals in between them, those make up the darker colored ones as well. And so they've been definitely subject to high temperature and high pressure, so high metamorphism. And they've also been exposed to some of the weathering agents at the surface. So you're seeing them a little bit oxidized and a little bit full of some plants or some lichens, it appears to be. The other two pictures that we have show two types of faults that are occurring. One of them being a strike-slip fault, and that's the one on the top right of the screen. So here we have simply two different blocks that are sliding one side past the other, and in the other picture we have a normal fault, or two normal faults I should say. So if you see right here, there's one of them, and then where the man is standing is the other normal fault. And here in the normal fault we have displacing of the different layers that have been deposited. So you see this layer on the left hand side block should go along with this other layer in the right hand side block, but because of the faulting and because of the shift in the earth, those are no longer together and they have been displaced after deposition. So one of those sides is going up relative to the other, that one being this one, and one of them goes down relative to the other, being this one. So both of these faults, the strike-slip fault up here and the normal fault here, occur as an effect to plate tectonics activity, most likely. There are other potential effects that cause faulting, and we will go over them throughout the course. The second subclassification of the major field of geology is historical geology. So the aim of historical geology is to understand the origin of Earth and its development through time. It tries to establish events in a chronological order. So because of the nature of both physical and historical geology, it is clear that the study of physical geology has to come first, as we need to understand how Earth works before we can attempt to understand its past and its possible future. And for us to be able to understand geology, many times we need to bring principles from other science, such as physics, chemistry, biology, for example. And it seeks to expand our knowledge of the natural world and our place in it. So historical geology, again, very key. It came after we started studying physical geology, but it tries to establish the different events that have occurred in a chronological order. For example, we have these two pictures here. The one in the bottom left shows you a bunch of petrified wood that is laying there. I believe this is in Arizona in the park there. But it's showing this petrified wood, so there are certain things that must have happened for it to be there. The first one, there must have been existing trees for the plant to actually grow, for the tree to grow. Then that tree must have died and gotten deposited. And then most likely it must have been exposed to different weathering agents, most likely water, to carry the minerals through the wood pore spaces, so the wood empty spaces, and leave some elements behind that created the minerals that are now replacing where the empty spaces between the wood pieces were. And now there's no longer any organic material, so there's no longer any wood within there. It's all just minerals that occupied the space where the empty spaces and then the organic spaces of the wood were. So that's one of the interesting things about that picture. But there is definitely a different or a specific chronological order for the events that occurred to take place in that picture. And then the picture on the right shows you, it's just a representation. It's in a museum, so it's a representation of the fossil that you have there towards the right of the picture of how that creature must have looked prior to it. So again, it gives you an understanding that things aren't how they are now necessarily, and understanding the past will give us a clue into how they were before, not just understanding the past of the life that we had before gives us a clue of how the conditions were as well. So the third course that we have here, the third subclassification, is environmental geology. So along with exploring the basic geologic concepts, during this course, again, we will be touching base on important relationships between people and the natural environment, as many of the problems and the issues addressed by geology are of practical value to people. So some of the ways that we as humans interact with our environment are through natural hazards. So once we interact with them, they become natural disasters. So again, I teach a course on natural disasters online on this topic. So if you're interested later, definitely let me know and I'll be happy to help you enroll. So among some of these natural disasters, we have things such as earthquakes, volcanoes, landslides, hurricanes, soil subsidence, amongst many others. The picture on the top right of the screen is showing you excuse me. The picture on the top right of the screen is showing you a sandstorm, I believe in Phoenix, Arizona, which they're fairly common in that area of the country. And the one on the bottom right is showing you a picture of a city in Venezuela that is exposed to a mudslide. So you are not able to see it in the picture, but there's a very high elevation change towards the north part of that picture, if it was to be north facing upwards. So there's a high elevation change, and you have rainy season, which causes easily erosion and further carrying of the mud and the water, which is now going through the city. We also interact with our environment because it is in it where we get the resources that we need to have to live. Those resources being water, oil, or gas, or just simply building materials such as rock and gravel or ores, etc. So the picture on the left is showing you a mining operation. I believe this is in northern Idaho, where we have a lot of them. So near a little bit, I guess, east of Coeur d'Alene, there's a bunch of ore mines where there are different metals used in the industry. And as you may know, the world population is continuing to grow. And if we want to succeed as a species, while still conserving our planet and making it a place where many other species and where new generations may live and succeed and grow, excuse me about that, we need to know how to manage our resources intake and production, as well as our negative direct impact that we have on the different species and on the planet itself, on the atmosphere, the hydrosphere, and all of them, as we'll go through them later. And whether or not we can mitigate the harm that we may be causing, if we are causing any. So again, those three things are some of the aspects that environmental geology deals with. So again, natural hazards and natural disasters, once we interact with them, the environmental resources that we can get from the earth, and also the challenge of living on this earth and making it useful and productive in the future for future generations and for future species, as our population is also growing. So those are three main things that environmental geology looks at. So having now a basis of physical, historical, and environmental geology, I want to jump into why it is that we should study geology.